And thanks you guys for coming. My name is Chuck Napier, and I'm going to be moderator of our panel topic today, the future of monetizing TV online. And so we really have an esteemed panel, and so I appreciate them coming and sharing their time and their insights with you. So I do quick introductions to the panel. We have Meredith Brace, who's a Senior Vice President of Digital Sales at Fox Network Groups. Jen Wilga, Chief Revenue Officer for MediaRadar, and Tony Goncalves, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at AT&T Entertainment Group. So very experienced industry executives from different perspectives. From strategy, entertainment with Tony, ad sales, and then ad insights and ad intelligence. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon, start with a few slides, kind of set the situation, for us, and then I have some questions for the panel. They could answer the questions or throw out other input, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for some Q&A. So let's just kind of set the stage, for this topic. There is this elephant in the room. Here we are in New York this week with the news fronts, and they're selling ad spots, 30-second linear TV ad spots. The pretty dominant spend still of advertising today, slightly eclipsed by all digital, but it's still a dominant form of advertising and ad dollars. So what's the problem with that is the younger generation is not looking at it. So you see, and we've heard of this tune out, and so you see from this research the under 34, the millennials and the Gen Z, have had a consistent decline for the past 5 years for their percent of time watching TV. And it's very dramatic. It's down to a 40% decline in TV viewing time the past 5 years in 18 and 24 years old. So these are a generation, even the 25 and 30-year-old millennials, that knew TV and grew up with TV, but they've shifted. They're not watching TV. This is live TV viewing as well as recorded TV viewing. And so, as you know, they've shifted to other devices, watching live video, watching short-form content, and things on their mobile devices. It's been a shift that we have seen, but the problem is with this shift of eyeballs and a whole generation that's cutting back on TV viewing, the advertising that targets this sweet spot of demographic is still predominantly on linear TV. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And here's some more thoughts on this. As the viewers have shifted to digital from linear, the ads are still 30-second pre-roll. That's like the ad agencies love to create 30-second pre-roll ads. That's what they do. Well, let's look at the problem with that. They hate it. 90% of consumers skip pre-roll ads. That's where the ads are going. That's what the ad agencies are creating. The consumers do not like it. Even if they do watch it, they don't watch it to completion. So less than 25% watch it to completion. So we have a mismatch here, of ad dollars and ad increase. And so it's not just for the pre-rolls, but as you know, ad blocking has picked up. So you look at the stats here. A third of internet users are using ad blocking now, which is a 30% increase over the past 4 years. So if you're not going to do the annoying 30-second pre-roll, if you want to do some display or some other ads that could be tracked, those are blocked, by the users because they don't want to see those ads. They want streaming, they want some more efficiency, especially on their mobile device. They know these ads, require data consumption, and they will block those. So we have a problem of monetization now. So we're going to talk about this afternoon, what else? What next can we do as videos shift from linear to OTT and to short form? So this slide just has some examples, and we're going to talk more about this afternoon, of the different types of content monetization options. E-commerce is one of those, selling within the merchandise on the ad, selling merchandising supporting what you see on TV. That could be done on a second screen. It could be done on the primary screen. but merchandising, back how TV started, buy this soap, the announcers used to do it back in the 60s. Native advertising, so your sponsors build in. The premier example here is Red Bull, their extreme sports sponsorships. It's like Red Bull /TV. It's very consistent with what they're doing. Then, of course, there's the basic subscription, pay per view. As part of, there's the virtual gifting, some other new technologies of way to do a pay per view without charging for viewing time. So this is just some thoughts of some new areas, but I'd like to now turn it over to the panel, and so you can hear from the industry experts. How are they tackling this shift of consumer viewing patterns to sponsorship, and making money, to paying for premium content. So I'll take a seat, and I will stop the slides. And Meredith, why don't you start us off and give us your thoughts on how Fox is adjusting to this demographic shift in viewing patterns?
Yeah, I mean, it's what I live every day. So working at a linear television company and selling television content online, you have a couple challenges. The good news is that consumers are there to those stats. I think we have a third of our audience now watching our shows in what we call digital or nonlinear environments. So that's everything from a desktop to a tablet to a mobile to a Roku to a Sony PlayStation to a set-top box VOD. So lots of different platforms. The challenge for us has been what you alluded to. One is the tolerance for consumers in those environments. They do not want the same ad load that they see on TV. They're used to, in on-demand environments, pay, whether it's the Netflix of the world and Amazon, they're used to paying for content. So ad-supported is tough. The other challenge we have is on the business side, the transactional side, in terms of advertisers and agencies, quite honestly, not really snapping to that shift. It's much slower in terms of where the dollars are following than that. But we are, at Fox, we're really concerned with the viewing experience. We made a big announcement this week for the upfronts. We have a new leader at Fox Networks Group, Joe Marchese, who has a digital background, and that's a really big deal for a TV ad sales president to have a digital background. And he made an announcement this week in terms of Fox content, or FX, the premium content we do on FX will absolutely have a reduced ad clutter environment. So we'll be dropping 75% of the ad load directly in response to what you're talking about. And we feel that it's the right thing for the consumer. It's absolutely the right thing for the advertiser in terms of breaking through to these audiences. And the transactional part is a little bit tricky, but we're figuring that out, but we think it's the right direction to go. So that's kind of how that's our first step, I think, with that sort of genre of television, which is probably some of the most premium stuff we have. If you watch Fargo or Atlanta or anything, it's great stuff, and we just think it's the right thing.
Good. So. Jen, any thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, we're definitely seeing this. Many of our clients, like Fox, are being faced with the same thing. So I agree with the feedback and comments that you had made earlier. First off, we know that the 30-second spot, primarily right now is being done by linear TV platforms, but there is definitely a push, particularly in the digital space, to do 15-second ad spots. In fact, we see a 41% increase year over year in advertisers really embracing this shorter format. So we definitely see a trend for that. Any advertising, for example, you see on YouTube, there's a lot of push for those bumper ads, those 6-second ads on either side. And we continue to see, brands really want to be associated with this, because the last thing an advertiser wants is for you to skip that ad. They want you to see the entire content. So we see that trend a lot. And the other one is, absolutely a push towards native, because native is that content where consumers are actively engaged in really interacting with that advertiser. There's been several studies that we've seen. One is saying that a consumer is 53% more engaged with that brand and actually reading the content through to its completion. And since you talked about multiple devices, people are consuming a lot of this content on their mobile device, and when it comes down to native, that consumer is 4 times more likely to click through the ad, to click through that native ad. So I think, reducing the amount of content and really having strong content will only help you bridge that gap and have a better relationship with the consumer.
Tony?
Yeah, look, I don't know how much more I can add. I can tell you that being a communications and a distribution company, we have the luxury of seeing firsthand where consumers are consuming. And it's beyond the television. And I have this general pet peeve. I'm known to have a little bit of a soapbox internally. As you see 60% of our mobile traffic being video, and you go consume long-form video on a mobile device, and you're met with multiple ad pods, that same 30-second spot times 6, how do we collectively, as an industry, expect the engagement of those consumers to be sustained on a device with that level of interruption when it's nothing, it's the complete opposite of a lean-back television experience. And so, just as you think forward, I just look at the world in a very fragmented way. Like we're no longer in a world where you can create one spot and have it just broadly distributed. Platforms are different, devices are different, screen sizes are different, engagement metrics are different. You can do things with a mobile device you can't do with a television, and we should be taking advantage of those, dropping ad loads down to a point where they're reasonable, increasing the entertainment value of the advertising and the consumer value prop of the advertising itself, and engaging that consumer in a much more holistic way, in a data-driven, much more targeted fashion. And I know Joe really well, and I sent him a note before the upfront. I wasn't quite sure what he was going to talk about, but I knew it was going to be bold. And we sit on panels and in dinners and have those discussions often of, how can we evolve? And it takes a domino. And I really do commend the team at Fox for kind of taking this first step towards a more consumer-centric approach to advertising monetization.
One of the funny things that we always talk about, or he always talks about, is, I don't mean to make this the Joe show, but when we went from radio to television, would you just put a radio ad on television?
That's
when
right.
You had the opportunity to see, you would never do that. Why are we taking television ads and putting them in digital, where you have the opportunity to interact with someone? You have a capability to have a conversation. You have a capability to adapt that conversation based on their behavior. And we are not doing that. And so we're dedicated to trying to leverage environments where you can have that richer experience and do that in a meaningful way, rather than just, taking what worked on one medium and putting it on another.
So that brings me to the question about the form factor of the small screen. As the stats showed, this shift to the millennials to smartphone and tablet viewing. So we had the 30-second linear TV spot, it lasts for 2 minutes, it doesn't work, as you were saying, Tony, because that's intention. The display ads that we've been working on so much in digital, for years, we get a nice big PC screen and someone's sitting with the screen in front of you. But now they're mobile. You say it's a different experience. So what do you guys think about monetization on this very small screen? What can work, since it's not too traditional?
Yeah, look, I think the very first hurdle is know your customer, know where they are, and know in the context of how they're watching. If they're walking, you might not be able to serve them the same type of ad as if they're sitting or leaning back. All of that exists, right? So contextualizing the advertising, we believe is extremely important. A data-driven decision is extremely important. And I know it sounds like we've been talking about this for 20 years, people, right? And so it sounds like every other panel, but we're at a point in time where this has to happen. Like there's no choice. And I think as distributors, those that have the relationship with the consumers, and as content creators, there's been a level of friction over time as to who monetizes and how they monetize and who owns the data and who doesn't. I believe that maybe I'm hopeful, but we're at a stage where we're bridging those gaps because we understand the necessity thereof. I think I'll save this next point for another question. I'll give my panel members here an opportunity, but I do want to kind of come back and talk about kind of 360 monetization. We're very focused on advertising. And I think, we're at a stage again where we've got to kind of think more broadly as to how we monetize our businesses.
The other point I was going to make to that is, you give the example of you're walking with your phone. It's how are we displaying the content? I mean, we're seeing more Snapchat. We presented an IAB event several weeks ago, and they were talking about really pushing and being the drivers for vertical video for that reason. It's a lot easier to consume content when I'm walking or doing different things that way, and how certain brands really want to be associated with this new type of format. And so we're definitely seeing an increase in creating this vertical format, particularly with, in the movie space, Star Wars Rogue One, it was all vertical videos. But the one brand that surprised me is Dyson, that's trying to be more leading edge and saying, hey, let's create this different type of content and engage that way with our consumers.
Look, it's the point I was making, so thank you for that reminder. I think the Dyson approach, it's fantastic, right? Because we're back to a place where whether you're even producing video or producing advertising, you can't produce once and deploy to many anymore. You have to, the creative has to follow the platform, whether it's on the content side or on the advertising side. And that's hard. It's hard because there's more cost, right? Yeah. There's more creative brain power that's necessary. And it's more challenging to measure.
So Tony, you're talking about the urgency. I think especially when you see this the shift of the demographic away from the big screen viewing. Do you think, or it's open to the panel, not just to Tony, are there any technologies or some other things that are kicking in now that are going to help with monetization? You mentioned the interactive capabilities of the smartphone that we didn't have before. So let's talk a little bit more about key enablers. What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, data, I guess, is the biggest one for us. We're just getting more and more capable of being able to use our own data, work with advertisers or whatever third parties in terms of their data, and just being able to have less waste and being able to get to the right people at the right time, served with the right message, being able to provide value in the data itself rather than just the space.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the biggest driver for us in terms of increased monetization and just how you monetize, really.
Yeah, look, you can only collect data if there's always on connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the fundamental difference today versus even just 10 years ago is everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket. Everybody's television is connected to the internet, and so that always-on connectivity allows for that data collection and data targeting like never before. And the next leap, so on the data, it becomes the attribution. So what happened after somebody saw an ad? Can you drive can you drive the closed loop decisioning to bring that data and that insight back back to the brands? But look, there's a slew of technologies. I think but nothing is material without this always-on connectivity. And I think that's where we not only see the urgency, I think we see the opportunity.
Right.
Absolutely.
So Jen, you guys are all into the analysis of ad effectiveness, but it's been the lingo's reach, and then step way down from reach, viewing time, because to Tony's point, we haven't had the capability of doing effective attribution yet. It's just been, reach. So how do you see that changing, given the fact that the viewership has changed, but still it's all about selling reach?
I think it's about selling reach. I think there's got to be a different measurement other than the GRP. It's all about attention, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Your first slide talked a lot about how we're watching in dual screens. I mean, my husband, and I'm sure I can't be the only spouse out there, but he hates watching TV with me because I'll say, why don't we watch The Housewives or whatever crazy show? He'll actually sit there and then I will not watch. I'll be on my phone the entire time. And I'm like, I'm not alone. 87% of people do the same thing. And so to me, it's that attention. You talk about attribution, what happens after the fact. The other thing I think that's going to be more of how many people are actually watching not only the show, but then watching the ads audibly. How does that impact the next stages from there? But I think there has to be a different way that we're measuring it. What type of engagement are we getting? So I think that's the shift that we're starting to see, is people have almost been beholden to this GRP data. And to your point, as you're shaking your head, there's many other ways that we can measure success and engagement.
We can't get farther, I mean, especially on the digital team, we can't get farther away from a reach frequency goal, because quite honestly, sound matters, whether sound's on, size of screen, time spent, like all these things that will matter if you are listening, giving your attention to a message and listening is so critical. And to say that every impression is created equal and then just drill that through. I mean, the whole idea of frequency in a media world, for those of you guys are familiar with advertising, is that you have to hit somebody 10 and 15 times for your message to go through. But that gets blown up when you have a very immersive engagement ad unit that you need a frequency of 1, that you can accomplish what you need to do in 15 seconds or 30 seconds. So yeah, we're dealing with a lot of antiquated sort of measurement in terms of how to reach people and quantify that, and we all need to do a better job of kind of making that leap.
Do you think engagement and having those standards, of engagement can get to the point of reach?
We see engagement more as a solve for, again, that you don't need for effectiveness versus reach. But yes, we're doing scalable solutions where you can reach a lot of people with an engagement ad, and everybody has a customized experience because they all did something different, but it was relative to them. And we have lots of research that shows that moved the needle on brand or purchase intent far further than some kind of standard video message that goes from one to many.
I just, we talk about these opportunities and options, these problems all the time, and we tend to try to solve them from the industry back. And so I typically just ask people when I get questions like that, it's like, well, what about you? Like, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a 15-second spot as a pre-roll that allows you to turn that 15-second required engagement into a 3-minute desired engagement, where you actually want to dive in and spend a bit more time with that brand, learn a little bit more, and I hate using this, but earn the opportunity to be more engaged with the content thereafter. Like some of this stuff ends up being overly logical, and I think of my kids. We all use our kids as examples. My son happens to love commercials, and he loves commercials that he can go and talk to his buddies about. The DirecTV I ended up in a ditch commercial sort of became a skit at school when these kids were like 7 years old. And that kind of gets me back to like the creative matters. And so there's all these debates as to whether the creative matters. And it's like, just look within, right? And so it's just, there's a really practical thing here. People want less ads. They want to feel good about the ads that they're being served, and they want to engage more with content more today than ever. We have this like,
how do you value their attention?
And how do you value their attention, right? And so the Nielsen rating point is probably not how you would value their attention going forward, right?
Tony, you said you want to make some comment about 360 view. Is there any thought on that?
Yeah, look, we spend so much time talking about advertising as the way to monetize, right? We're a pay TV distributor at the core and a connectivity company. We believe in a dual side business model, right? One that's subscription, one that's advertising, and one that sort of leads you to a more sort of a better, more targeted advertising model. But as you think about the demographic that we're talking about, right, tomorrow's consumers, you step back, I ask myself all the time, will my kids buy what I sell? And the answer is no, right? So how do we extract dollars out of that next generation viewer in a way that is meaningful to them and allows us to keep investing in great media and great content and great products? And there aren't a lot of companies that do this well, but when you think about it, you think about what we call, super serving an audience. We have two companies in a joint venture. We have a Peter Chernin called Outer Media, one via Crunchyroll, which super serves anime fans, which has 1 million paying subs on their SVOD service, but they buy T-shirts. We often say, like, you've struck a chord if they buy the T-shirt, right? So that's like one example of like just totally super serving an audience. That tends to be like 80+% of their revenue is subscription. There's a similar service called Rooster Teeth under the Outer Media umbrella, and they are at the core, they're a studio. And they're a studio. They serve generally the same audience, that kind of gamer, sort of fanboy audience. They have a subscription service. They have a live events service. They create content and distribute it, and they create, sell, and distribute merchandising in the same fashion that you create, sell, and distribute content. And so the merch becomes just these fans just want to engage. Over 10 million YouTube subscribers. They're massively a really successful business. So when I look at the sort of the balanced revenue portfolio, I kind of step back and I go, okay, does that become the monetization vehicle of the future, where advertising is just a component, right? Like less than a quarter of that company's business revenue is generated through advertising. Everything else is through engaging that fan really deep with a piece of IP.
I think we're not a demise of advertising. It's how do we complement the traditional advertising. We're starting to run near the end of the session time, so I'll open it up for audience questions. So does anyone in the audience have questions for the panel? Sure, go ahead.
So in Fox, are you a little bit nervous of the erosion of revenue that you have? I mean, I just look at what happened to print, and they would never be able to make up the print dollars in digital in the same way on linear broadcasting versus digital.
So Meredith, let me repeat first just for the microphone.
Sure.
So the question is to Fox about revenue erosion when you do the strategy of reduced ad spots.
Well, I'll take reduced ad spots separately. I mean, I think the fact that we announced a digital sort of visionary as the leader of what was a traditional linear sales company says one thing. I think, yes, it's a challenge to sort of go after this expanded footprint, but I couldn't feel more excited about the challenge in terms of our ability to rapidly build for these different platforms and understand as much as we can with insights and really attack it completely differently than we would in a traditional TV business, which I don't know if you can make that analogy back to print. But the fact is we're storytellers. We're a storytelling company. If you think about Fox, Fox Sports, FX, we tell great stories, and we want to be able to distribute and publish those stories wherever we can. And at this point in time, yes, we do have alternative monetization where we sell that content to other non-advertised reported places, and you can assume who they are. But we also believe in ad-supported as well. We feel like we owe it to brands to have these stories to be able to tell their stories. So we're not really frightened, but it is a big, this week, billions of dollars will be transacted in linear television. And increasingly, digital is a big portion of that because, like I said, a third of that audience is watching in live TV environments. So.
All right, question, the green shirt first.
Sure. This is really for anybody, but when you compare the linear traditional TV model with digital, with linear and you have an advertisement on that, you're really sending out one advertisement, broadcasting it out for a reach out, and hope for the best. I mean, that's really, Nielsen, and that's kind of how traditionally we've done it. And now in digital, you can kind of target that a little better. We're just getting to the point where you can really target, really specifically to the device, even the user. So do you see that you could put a higher dollar amount on that ad, on that impression? Because as we were talking about, not all impressions are the same. So if you can add some value to that impression, do you see that kind of helping reduce that? Kind of what you were saying, or reducing that to 25%.
I mean,
does that increase the value?
That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Of all the ads in there.
Well, I mean, that's happening today in terms of addressable TV, which has happened for a number of years now, where that rich data and able to get to the right person, you know, is easily 6 times the cost, but probably 10 times more effective. So that's already happening. In digital, just we're allowed to get there faster. You know, when we talk about the reduced ad load, the whole idea of the reduced ad load is the ability to create a richer experience up front and not have the need to have frequency. So if we can create a situation where someone's immersing into an experience and then just reminded throughout that show that that's being brought to you by AT&T or whoever that is, you've created a hell of an effective unit and over time reduce the cost because you didn't have to run that over and over again. So lots of different things happening across the 2 platforms, but absolutely that's the target and the end goal for everything.
So we have an addressable TV advertising platform at AT&T that we started with DirecTV and then kind of brought in through the merger. We use this example, and so we're in the early innings of all of this, and so the fact that the ad load's been reduced at this point sort of starts marrying these things together. You know, we don't really talk about the increased CPMs, but it is significantly higher. Only 3% of the population is ever in the market for a car, right? How many of you are in the market for a car today, right? Okay, maybe 2% of the room. But the fact is, the 2 of you that raised your hand are in the market for a different car. Yet we're blasting you with Chevy, Mercedes, you know, BMW ads. Our addressable TV platform has allowed automakers to get fairly specific towards a demo and or a geography so that to minimize that waste even on that 3%, right? So even if you got to the 3% that were in the market for a car, there's still waste there. And so we've been able to get fairly specific for the automaker as to, you know, sort of increase effectiveness and increase overall CPM. At what point now does that translate into a lower ad load for one very specific reason, engagement, right? So when you create content, you want people to watch it, right? You don't want them tuning out. You want them engaged consistently. And that ultimately is that full circle that kind of comes back and you go, okay, we've effectively succeeded in engaging consumers with great content and monetizing it effectively for the brands.
The one thing just to piggyback on this, when you mention automakers, renewal rates in general for video are very high, especially even in comparison with native. It's over 66% renewal rates. However, auto, because they've gotten so smart in who they are really targeting for those advertising campaigns, they're renewing 80% plus. And I think they've just gotten smarter in who they're serving the ads with and then the results that they're seeing after that.
Yeah. And the addressable TV platforms is allowed to sort of bring the targeting of digital to the television, you know, to the television space.
Brian?
Thank you. Mario Armstrong with TV, which is a production with Broker Media, and we do long-form content. So my question is, mostly for mobile. My question to Tony specifically is, in your 360-degree approach of looking at monetization, how important is brand integrations as a part of that mix?
Yeah. So,
just to repeat for the mic, Tony. So the question is, how important is brand integration into the brands?
yeah, this goes to the point of native advertising. I mean, I'll speak to you as a brand, as we think about how, when we advertise, how we are changing the way that we're advertising and reaching consumers. 30-second spot, it's not created equal. The platform's not created equal. The demographics not created equal. And so the answer is it's important depending on what the goal is and what that platform is, et cetera. So we've, through Otter Media and the Full Screen Creator Network, which is largely a social media creative community, we launched a program last year we call Hello Lab, which brought 10 creators into the fold and had them create content on behalf of AT&T. One of them was a show called At Summer Break, following a group of teenagers over the summer. I think it's second or third season coming into At Summer Break, so just as an example. In 1 year, almost 1 billion views. And so as a brand, I can't measure, there's no attribution, we don't know if they bought anything, right? And so that's the challenge, right? The measurement becomes a challenge, but you just sort of step back, right? And we've reached 30 million uniques, we've had almost 1 billion views, and a billion impressions, I'm sorry, over 100 million views. And you just got to step back. I won't tell you exactly what it costs to go do it because there's a bunch of, but it's an effective spend of dollars. And so I look at that as a brand. We're thinking about new and innovative ways to reach consumers. And as I think about the devices they're on and the demos that we're trying to reach, we just have to do things differently. As a matter of fact, in Outer Media, we have an ad agency that does only social, and a company called McBeard, specifically for that reason, right? And they've become experts in how to reach a certain audience in a certain form factor with a certain type of creative.
If you could attribute conversions, just a quick follow-up, if you could attribute conversions, would that be something that's important? It's highly important, whatsoever than the amount of views that you get?
Oh, yeah, of course, right? Which is where, again, this data monster just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, the amount of data you have is great. What you're able to do and do with that data is what really matters, right? I often say the difference between data and insights is billions of dollars.
Actually, one more question. I'll let the panel wrap up. Go ahead from the back.
It's not only the system, it's also the advertisement that we are getting in digital. It's not just the same advertisement videos that get passed on to digital. Is it that brand owners who should try to force to say, like, don't give us this advertisement, or if the people who are actually paying the money, they should come up with new creatives to try to say,
I think the question is, the videos tend to be just rehashed and not, personalized or creative. So how is that being fixed?
One thing that we're doing with these new ad formats and engagement specifically is we've created a studio team. Because a lot of times agencies will have an asset, and so we try to make it easy for them to say, give us your asset, give us your brief, give us your everything today, and we'll help you create a better experience that gives people choice and the ability to do different things. Because you're right, you don't want the same ad over and over. There's wear out, there's all the different things. And again, that one ad is not going to be relative to everybody, but if you can create an experience where they can kind of choose their own path. I mean, one of our examples is an ad we did for Zillow, where they came into the environment right out of the gate. Are you looking to purchase a home? Yes, I am. We automatically know you're at least interested. Single family or apartment. So you kind of go down that path. So it's increasingly getting more relevant as you go, and then to the point where you can put in your zip code, and it's going to show you a live feed within the ad of those homes that are available in your area. So you just created a very sticky experience for somebody, where it was relevant to them every step of the way versus showing a nice ad that made them feel good about moving.
Yeah.
And it was featuring a family, and you may not have a family.
Right.
So, it's really about using that platform and that technology to, again, tell the right story to the right person at the right time.
So I ask people a whole bunch. As you can tell, not one ad isn't created equal. One piece of content isn't created equal. It's a bit of a soapbox. But do you put the same post on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter?
Sometimes not.
Sometimes. But if you want effectiveness, right, you create yourself as a consumer. You tweet differently than you Instagram, and you Facebook differently than you Instagram. And so we're sort of in that same, and the fact that I'm actually talking about 4 different social platforms gives us, just reminds us as to how fragmented consumer engagement is today.
I think we're going to wrap it up. We are out of time, so I'll just turn over to the panel, see if you guys have any, parting thoughts. Great discussion. I could sit here the rest of the evening, and hear you guys, because this is, really shaped in the ground we're under. Billions of dollars, as you say, Meredith, being, allocated this week, maybe not effectively. But it's exciting times.
Yep.
So, any final thoughts you guys want to share with the audience before you wrap?
Look, we're in an industry undergoing seismic shifts. And what's really, really exciting about what is that the consumer's in charge, right? We talk about how it's a consumer's world and we're just living in it. Industry and consumers don't always meet, but ultimately consumers win. And I think as an industry with the vast amount of money that's floating in our industries, it's not a matter of if we innovate and sort of move forward. It's what we do to innovate and what we do to meet these consumers where they are.
Yeah, I would just say, again, the exciting part about streaming and content, there is so much out there. And the fact that there is so much out there, and there's, again, choice in the hands of the consumer, it just keeps making the bar higher to create better content. So as a TV lover, television content lover, I love the things that we have available. I don't have enough time in a day to watch everything that's in my queue that I'd like to watch. So I think it's an exciting time to both be a part of this business, be a part of content, and then strive and do whatever we can to make sure that we're doing the best service we can to the consumer.
Yeah, I would disagree. I think it's an unbelievable time for innovation. And as consumers, I think we should also be the drivers and like and share the things that we think is really good content, because then I think it becomes a two-way dialogue.
Okay, so thank you, panel, for
Thank
coming
you.
and your insights. Thank you guys for your time today. And wrapping up this session.